Hello and welcome back to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about the recently released books. Welcome back. Again, this is Ray Walters. In the quiet countryside southwest of Budapest, a family of humble origins is swept into the tumultuous tides of history. Through their eyes, we witness the rise and collapse of empires, the devastation of world wars, the haunting grip of pandemics, and the relentless march of ideology, both liberating and oppressive. This is not just the story of one family. It's a panoramic view of a world reshaped by conflict, loss, and resilience. With deeply human characters and historically grounded narrative, the novel illuminates the personal cost of political upheaval and the quiet strength it takes to endure. It's a book that invites us to reflect on the past, not as a closed chapter, but as a living thread woven into our present. At the center of this sweeping historical fiction is a family called the Kovacs, and the storyteller behind their journey is here with us today. Please help me welcome the author of the book, The Queen's Sacrifice, LeBron Sims. Hi, Lee. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here today.
Lee, congratulations in getting this book published. It took you 10 years before putting it on paper.
Yeah, I mean, it just kept rolling around. The story was haunting me. It just
Okay.
and it evolved over time, and then I started writing it, and once I started writing, the word just seemed to flow to me.
Lee, I'd like to start this conversation with what sparked this novel for you. Was it a personal connection, a historical research, or a specific moment that set this story in motion? So what inspired you to write The Queen's Sacrifice, and how did you first conceive the fictional story of the Kovacs family?
I grew up in a military family, and my father was a veteran of World War II. And after the war, he bought a small farm in
Mm,
Northwest Georgia, where I was born. And I lived on the farm for about 4 or 5 years until my father decided to go back into the military. And I've always been a student of history, and
mm,
particularly military history. And a lot of the story is very experiential for me.
mm,
And growing up on the farm, I used to shuck corn. I used to feed the chickens. I used to hunt for eggs. And I had a younger brother, and we kind of grew up together. We were a couple of years apart, but um, everyone in the family was expected to contribute. And
okay.
I lived next to a farm um, where my mother grew up, and as a young girl, and I used to spend a lot of time there with my aunt, and we would do things together,
Mm,
pick fruit, harvest crops and everything. So growing up on a farm like that, we raised a lot of our own food. We had to,
mm.
and it was nothing. I was never paid for any of the work that I did, but it was just expected of you. And
Right.
you had to contribute to survive.
Your book spans some of the most turbulent events in history. How did you balance the historical accuracy with storytelling?
Well, that was a very exciting part about it because it was a part of history that I was not familiar with. I thought I knew a lot about World War One, but uh, it was part of the war that occurred in Western Europe. I didn't know what happened in Eastern Europe until I started researching it, and it was just cataclysmic. And
Mm,
when you write history, history can be very dry, and
Yeah.
for I wanted to personalize it and see how those historical events if affected the people
Mm,
at that time and what they experienced, what they lived through. And so you have to weave the story together, history and fiction, and to make it seem more real to people, more personal. And just in the narrative, because you go through different phases: World War One, the Spanish flu pandemic, and then
yeah.
World War Two.
Yeah.
And the history itself is very, very rich. When you look at the what happened in the Balkans and Hungary itself, and after the
Mm,
war, the chaos that ensued, and those societies, as those histories, those empires that existed for hundreds of years
mhm.
and going back centuries. And then following World War One, many of them collapsed, and that brought on, more chaos.
Right. Because I believe when it comes to uh fiction, and you're creating a story that didn't happen in real life, but then again you're setting it in the 19th century and early parts of the 20th century. At least that's what I got from your book. And um to my perspective, that is quite a challenge when you're writing. How long did it take you? I know it took you 10 years, but the research part, was it really
I
difficult to
I
go through?
I spent almost a year researching it, and what I found just really allowed me to construct this story of the
Mm,
family. It had a huge impact.
right. Um, you have to help me here, Lee. The character, the protagonist here is Yemus, right? Is that how you
Yes,
pronounce
yes,
the first name?
yes.
Yemus David Kovacs or Kovac?
Kovac.
Kovac. So we have here the protagonist. Um, how did you develop this character? And what do you hope readers to take away from the protagonist's journey?
Well, growing up in that family, his father was an orphan,
Mm,
and he never received much in the way of education. And he had to work on a kibbutz in northern Hungary.
okay.
And um, he learned to work very hard. He had a very, very strong work ethic, and he imparted that to his children. He would tell them the work came first. It had to for them to survive. His mother, on the other hand, she was a teacher early
Mm,
on. She's taught small children, and it was important to her and to her husband that the children, you know, learn. And when Yamos went to school, it was a small country school. He was years ahead of the other student. He knew how to read, knew how to write, and he had a love of learning.
mm,
So she also taught her husband Lucas how to read and how to write. So she was very instrumental in the development of the family. The family was very, they really were dependent on each other. Everybody was expected to contribute to the work that was done, and they lived on a small farm,
mm.
about 10 to 15 miles from Budapest, and it was a Jewish community. So they all worked together, they all contributed, and I think that's where the power of those individuals in that family came from.
We spoke about family, and we have the Kovacs family here in the story. So this family experiences so much together. You have love, loss, and resilience. Uh, did you see their struggles as a sort of a microcosm of what many Jewish families face during this era?
Well, yes, the Kovacs. they were pretty isolated. They lived on a small farm outside the city, away
Mhm.
from the city. They had a small village that they went to from time to time, but they were fairly insulated. During that period prior to World War One, there wasn't a lot of anti-Semitism. That came much later.
Mm.
Um, it did exist in Europe to some degree, but they were not really affected by it. The Jewish population of Hungary was less than 5%, but they tend to live in enclaves in certain areas together, and that was their world. The Kovacs did not know much about the outside world. There was a Rabbi Kiss, who came by once a month, usually at dinner time. And he would tell them, he would give them the news of what was happening in the Jewish community at that time and what was happening maybe in the larger world. But that was their only contact.
Um, the title, The Queen's Sacrifice, suggests themes of strategy, sacrifice, and power. What does the title mean in the context of the novel?
The Queen's Sacrifice is really a metaphor for the book. And if you're a chess player, the Queen's Sacrifice is one of the most difficult. I don't know if you play, but it's one of the most difficult moves in chess. And to deliberately sacrifice your queen is just incredible.
Right.
It's Bobby Fischer was a master at the queen's sacrifice, and consequently, in life, the way I think of it is you have to make difficult decisions sometimes. You
Yes.
know, do I
Mm.
do I buy the new car or do I save my money, for something
Right.
else, sending the kids to college or something like that. So there are difficult decisions to be made. And Yamos was confronted with one of the most difficult decisions he had to make, as a physician.
Your depiction of war, particularly World War One and Two, is both vivid and haunting. What did you want readers to understand about these conflicts that history books might not fully capture?
Usually when you read history, you read about the major battles, the Battle of Verdun, the Battle of the Somme, all the major battles that occurred in any conflict. And what happens to the individual soldier? He does not know. He's not aware of the overall strategies. He's only confronted with living day to day, and he only sees what's in front of him,
Mm.
and he has to survive. That's his main goal, to survive. And death is constantly with him.
Right.
Napoleon said, I think his description was, the life of the individual soldier consists of long periods of boredom highlighted by brief moments of terror. And that was his perspective, and I think he got it right. He got it right,
Mm.
because sometimes the fear just takes over.
I agree. Um, one of the novel's most compelling elements is how history repeats itself. How do you see the echoes of this past in today's world? Because the book draws strong parallels between historical events and current global tensions.
Well, absolutely. We've seen it. There are definite parallels between what happened then and what's happening now. William Shire was a foreign correspondent for the Chicago Tribune, and he was
Mm.
in Berlin in 1933, and he saw the rise of Hitler, the rise of Nazism, and all the anti-Semitism that was occurring. And he famously said, if it could happen here, it could happen there. And we're seeing that today. History is very much repeating itself. We saw it during COVID. If you compare COVID to the Spanish flu pandemic, and there are definite similarities that occurred there. And now In the political realm, we're seeing it again, the rise of autocratic rule and
Mm,
even a possible dictatorship. Um, our democracy is under threat. It's it's happening right now, right in front of us. So, and
mhm.
we have to do what we can to defend it.
What's fascinating with Yemas is his faith and background. It shaped him in profound ways. So, did you feel a responsibility to capture the Jewish experience with particular nuance? And we're talking about the Jewish experience in Hungary during such a volatile period.
Oh yes, I have a very good friend. He is Jewish, and he told me once that I was interested in Judaism, and he said that Judaism is not so much a religion, it is a tradition, and
Mm,
it is a system of values that you live by. Yamos was living in Budapest at the time. He and his wife Nora, he experienced the growing anti-Semitism that was going on. He had firsthand experience with that, and when he was attacked, his house was firebombed, and they lost everything, and they were lucky to survive. And the only thing he had was his wife Nora, and they gave each other their strength to endure and to go on uh, and rebuild their lives.
mm.
I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
You have, and it actually made me think because so much of this story is about enduring hardship, but also, what comes after. So, how do your characters, particularly Yemas, find a path forward?
well, he and Nora, they were able to give each other strength.
Mm,
They gave each other their strength, and um, they had they had faith in each other that they could endure all the bad that was occurring. And life is very unpredictable. There are no guarantees for any of us. And I sometimes I get worried about what is happening now and what could happen in the future. So, but my wife and I, we've been married for a long time, and
mm.
we're just we have confidence in ourselves and in each other that we can persevere. So,
That's very good to know. Um, we I'm not sure if this is often the case, but writers often discover new angles as they dig into history. So, in your part, was there anything that reshaped the direction of your storytelling when you were writing this book?
well, um, the concentration camp, I was not aware of when they at the end near the end of the war that
Mm,
the Germans had to evacuate the camps, and it forced the prisoners to march, and they had to march. It was the middle of winter, and many of the prisoners, they didn't have proper shoes or clothing, and thousands of them died. They froze to death in the snow, and there are still mass graves today in Poland or in all of Europe where
mm.
these prisoners died. And that really, I realized at that time that was the moment that Yamos, they had to make their escape.
Lee, every book leaves an imprint on its readers. For you, what is the most important idea or feeling you hope stays with with them, with your readers, long after they finish the last page of your book?
someone who read my book, he said the book stays with you for a long time after you finish reading it. And I don't know, are there lessons to be learned that I impart some knowledge? I don't know if that was the case or not. I mean, some people say, you know, they learned something from the book, and it was a history that they weren't aware of. There are people today who would deny the Holocaust, and
Yeah.
there's no single event in history that has been more documented than the Holocaust, what happened in those camps. I personally know two people who were children at Auschwitz, and they have the tattoos on their forearm. And it's just incredible that anyone could deny what happened at that dark time of history.
I believe, in my opinion, one way for us to actually sort of like appreciate the current times that we have right now is to look back on the past, because everything that we have right now, everything that we are experiencing, enjoying, it's a product of what happened in the past. And appreciating the present actually has something to do with also looking back in the past. Lee, finally, where can people find your book? And do you have any upcoming projects we should be looking out for?
There are any number of places where you can find the book online, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There Balboa Press, certainly the publisher. You can find it there. There are just a number of places, and I hope people would buy the book and read the book and write a review. Write a review. I've gotten some very positive reviews so far, and I've got one negative comment from my daughter. She read it. That's the only one so far. But so there was one aspect of the book she didn't particularly like, but she did read it. So, but she did enjoy it. So.
Lee, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
taking
Thank
us your
you. So
questions.
I'll look forward to watching this, on YouTube when it comes out. So
Right.
thank you, Ray. So
Thank you so much, Lee. I also want to give a big shout out to our awesome viewers and listeners for joining us for this interview. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations on the Book Connection Show. I'm Ray Walters. Join me next time as we explore the world of self-supported publishing, one indie author at a time.